So I've been using the M1 Ultra Mac Studio since it launched back in 2022, and my lease ended on it a few months ago. I actually leased it through Apple's business program. So I've been paying month to month, waiting on an M4 Ultra Mac Studio, which isn't coming this year. And I held off on upgrading on the M2 Ultra because I knew Apple was gonna be coming out with these M4 chips this year. And so when Apple announced the M4 Pro Mac Mini, and then they showed the performance gains, it got me a little curious. I was like, well, I wonder if I maxed out an M4 Pro Mac Mini, could it potentially replace my Mac Studio? So today we're gonna find out. I'll be testing both machines in a real world workflow scenario, the way I would work as a professional photographer and a video editor, and just see if that M4 Pro Mac Mini can at least perform the same or better. If it does better, that's awesome. So stay tuned to the end because I'll make the call on whether I should switch from the M1 Ultra to the M4 Pro, or just stay with the M1 Ultra Mac Studio because it's still so good. But before we get to that, let's break down the specs and take a closer look at the I/O, because for creators, the ports could make or break or be a big difference because they are slightly different. So starting out with the M4 Pro Mac Mini, obviously it's small, but don't let that fool you because Apple really pushed the bar with this thing. We've got a 14 core CPU and a 20 core GPU, 64 gigs of RAM and a 1 terabyte SSD. And for a Mini, that's some pretty impressive hardware, and the early benchmarks are showing some crazy gains with this processor. So over to the M1 Ultra Mac Studio, this has a 20 core CPU and a 48 core GPU and the same amount of 64 gigs of RAM and a 1 terabyte SSD. Now this has a lot more GPU power, and that's gonna be key in some of these tests like video rendering or effects. But the question is, does it justify the price over the Mac Mini? Because it's almost double the price. Now when it comes to the I/O, the M1 Ultra Mac Studio is loaded. Up front, we've got 2 Thunderbolt 4 ports and an SD card reader. Perfect for creators that need quick access to media. I use this all the time for dumping footage. Around back, you're looking at 4 more Thunderbolt 4 ports, a 10 gig Ethernet, HDMI 2.0, and 2 USB-A ports. And of course, the power button where you'd expect it on the back. And the M4 Mac Mini, on the other hand, is a little bit more of a minimalist setup. So it's got 2 USB-C ports up front and a headphone jack. And then on the back, there's 3 Thunderbolt 5 ports, which is awesome to see because this is gonna future-proof it. They're double the speed over Thunderbolt 4, and it's gonna be good for driving multiple high-res monitors, Thunderbolt 5 hubs with way more ports. It also has HDMI 2.1, and it also has a single 1 gig Ethernet, which you could upgrade to a 10 gig Ethernet. Doesn't have an SD card slot, and the power button is on the bottom. So it's kind of in an awkward spot if you turn your system on and off often, but it's so light you can just lift it up and turn it on and off. It's not a big deal. It's not what we're used to. Okay, so let's get into some tests. I'm gonna load up a 4K full YouTube video with, it's got different frame rates, 4K 24, 4K 60, 4K 120 frames per second. Gonna have some color grading and effects, and that is what I typically work with all the time. And then I'm gonna pull up some 6K Red RAW footage, music video, basically a full edit timeline with color grading. And I feel like that's a good workload because even the M1 Ultra will stutter sometimes. So I wanna see if the M1 Pro can even keep up with it, even at half the resolution, but we'll see. And then for photographers, I'm gonna work on some 100 megapixel Hasselblad files in Photoshop. Just load a bunch of them in to see how well it handles those heavy files in editing and how it utilizes the RAM, because we got way more RAM in this thing. Well, we have the exact same amount of RAM in this thing, but it's a lot for a Mac Mini. So yeah, I'm not gonna show any random benchmarks. There's enough reviews out there if you wanna find all the Geekbench scores and Blender tests and stuff like that. I'm just here to show you if the M4 Pro Mac Mini can keep up with my M1 Ultra Studio. Maybe some of you out there in the same position as me and you're thinking about doing the same thing. I know other people also edit in Premiere and Final Cut, so I know some of you are gonna ask for that, but I don't edit in that, I edit in DaVinci Resolve, so you're gonna see it in the way that I work. All right, so I'm gonna launch one of my YouTube videos here. This is typically what I'd work with. It's got a bunch of different frame rates, 24, 60, 120p. That actually loaded really fast. But what I wanna see is how it works in the timeline. I don't really care too much about exports. I'll do an export anyway, but I just care mostly how it performs in the timeline because that's where you see the computer's true power. So I'm gonna scrub through it. I'm gonna zoom in here, scrubbing through it. And just to show you, I'm playing back at full quality here. So full quality, and this is a 4K project. Let's just play this and see how it goes. No drop frames, running perfect. There's also a little effect in here. This little pan up effect. Sometimes the Mac Studio will actually struggle on those. So it was nice to see that that plays back fine. Actually, let's get into the deeper stuff here. So this is 3 layers of 4K playing back at full quality over top of each other. GPU is up to 44%, CPU 17%, 43% GPU. So there's still tons of headroom on this GPU, it seems to be, in when you're working with this type of stuff. This is H.265 footage. So the computer does have encoders and decoders and all these media engines. So maybe that's offloading some of the work where the GPU and CPU don't have to do as much. But in DaVinci Resolve, running this type of stuff, it's a breeze. All right, so we're gonna export this as H.265, 4K, this is 24 frames per second, 60,000 kilobits per second. I'm gonna save it to the desktop. That way it's using the internal storage, so it'll be a little bit faster. Add, replace, render all. So let's see what it does. Typically, the Mac Studio cranks out edits, my YouTube edits in like 3 minutes. So this is saying 4 minutes and 40 seconds right now, 4 minutes and 30 seconds. This is a real world test right here because this isn't some benchmark. This is what I would actually do. So this is what I really wanted to see. So I just wanted to jump in here real quick. We're about 60% away through the export. We got 1 minute and 30 left. I'm at the part where I was showing those 3 layers of 4K, and I noticed the CPU on the export has been just sitting at like 17%, but the GPU went from 50% while exporting all the way up to 97%. So we're almost utilizing the entire GPU in this Mac Mini, and it completed the export at 5 minutes and 30 seconds. All right, so launching the same project on the M1 Ultra Mac Studio. And I just want to show you how this performs because this is what this was edited on, was this computer, so it should run perfect. No drop frames, running perfect, full screen. Well, it started lagging there on that effect where the M4 Mac Mini didn't lag on that effect. Now that it's cached, I think it's running fine. So scrubbing the timeline here seems to be pretty much exactly like the M4 Pro Mac Mini. Let's take it to this section where there's 3 layers of 4K playing over top of each other. Okay, I'm just gonna play it. It's running fine. That's 24 frames per second, not dropping frames, full screen. It's basically playing back perfectly. All right, I'm gonna open up Activity Monitor here. So CPU right now is running at like 7%, 4%. So it's hardly doing anything. The GPU is running at 24% right now, and that's doing all 3 layers of 4K. So you can see how much more power this thing has when it comes to the GPU cores, because it just has more of them. So I'm gonna export this and we'll figure out what kind of a time difference it's gonna be between the two. Now I'm gonna export this project, same thing, H.265 to the desktop, 60,000 kilobits per second. Add to render queue and start rendering. Now this is where we're gonna see the M1 Ultra probably just crush this. 4 minutes, 3 minutes, 3:15, 3. This thing is ripping. So that's why I love the M1 Ultra Mac Studio. You can see it right off the bat here, how much more horsepower you get when it comes to exporting because of those extra GPU cores. There we go, it just finished. It took 2 minutes and 18 seconds. So the M1 Ultra Mac Studio, when it comes to rendering, crushes the M4 Pro. Again, that's probably just due to the extra GPU cores. So it's got an extra 28 GPU cores. So I guess that makes all the difference right there. Same amount of RAM. The CPU was hardly getting used. Same with the M4 Pro, it was hardly getting used. Okay, I'm gonna bring in a Red Raw project because I do edit a lot of client music videos, and that's where I needed the M1 Ultra Mac Studio for that type of stuff. That loaded so fast. Holy crap. For the first time loading it in here. Now this does have color grading, some halation, some noise reduction, a whole bunch of stuff. And we've got the playback resolution set at half. And it's probably because I was editing at half resolution on the M1 Ultra Mac Studio, because even at full, it was like lagging out and stuff. That noise reduction on raw footage just kills computers. Let's start out with full and see if it can actually play back in full. So far it's good, 24 frames per second, no drop frames. It hasn't dropped frames. Make it full screen. I don't know what I'm seeing right here. This little tiny thing is doing this, no problem. Let me just show you what we're working with here. This is 6K footage, R3D. When we come to the color correction stuff here, I have a little bit of noise reduction, 3.4 on the Luma and Chroma. And then obviously I've got some color grading and a LUT on it and stuff. Like this is the normal footage here. I don't have a ton of nodes on this stuff. These files didn't really need it, but maybe we can load up some more nodes and see what happens if it brings this thing to its knees. That's at full resolution we're playing it back too, keep in mind. Let's just add, let's add some more nodes. Let's add like a Gaussian blur. Let's bring it down a little bit. Let's add, I don't know, just some film grain. I'm just gonna ruin my entire color grade and apply that across these next 5 clips. Okay, so from here to here now, we've got 3 nodes. We've got noise reduction, color correction, Gaussian blur, and some grain added. Now it's dipping down to 24. Says it's playing at 24, but that looks slow. Okay, so that's weird. It's saying it's playing back at 24 right here, but it definitely is not. So let's go to our playback resolution and put that to half. Now it's playing back perfect. That's cool. It's pretty much playing back perfect, 24 frames per second right now with those effects on. That's really, really impressive for this little M4 Pro Mac Mini when you look at the size of this thing. So I've got the LUT and some color grading. I got a Gaussian blur and some film grain on here. And let's see if we can play that back at full quality. And it's doing it. 24 frames per second right now, no issues. Still hasn't dropped any frames. You know, full screen with that. Still playing back fine, no drop frames. So that's where the GPU in the M1 Ultra is definitely crushing it when it comes to video editing compared to the M4 Pro. And maybe why, if you're working with files like this, you might want to stay within the M2 Ultra or M4 Max and not get this. You're not giving up a lot to have this cheaper computer that can do this, which is crazy. But the M1 Ultra is definitely the one to go for this. Sorry, I guess it'll be the M2 Ultra unless you buy an M1 Ultra used, which you could probably find for a crazy deal at this point. But yeah, it's playing back fine, no issues, and that's what I would expect. Okay, so I want to take a look at some 100 megapixel Hasselblad files in Photoshop. This is something I know that the M1 Ultra starts to struggle with when I get about 10 Photoshop files. These are large document Photoshop files, by the way. And I know when I get about 10 to 11 of these high-res large documents in Photoshop on the M1 Ultra Max Studio, it starts to beach ball once in a while. And I know when I'm trying to zoom in and stuff, it starts to freeze up and lag a little bit. So I want to see what this thing does. So far, one file running perfect. I got a couple of layers in here just to see if it slows it down a little bit. I'm curious to see how much RAM we're using right now. We are using only 19 gigs of RAM. And CPU right now at 15%, GPU at 0. All right, I'm gonna open up a couple more of these files. And just for the heck of it, I'm gonna open up in Camera Raw. This is one with a little preset I have on it, and it's running perfect, no lag. Let's open that up. So now we've got 4 100 megapixel medium format RAW files in Photoshop, literally running perfect. Nice and sharp, nice and smooth. Let's try something crazy. Like let's open up DaVinci Resolve and let it play back this project while I'm editing photos just to see if it can do that. And this is the whole reason why you'd want all this extra RAM. So I'm just gonna start playing that. Zoom in here, we can do some retouching stuff. So far, no issues, running perfectly smooth. That's pretty crazy. I mean, if I wanted to, I could start an export too and just see how it handles that. So we're gonna export this to the desktop. Start rendering. There it goes, it's exporting. Back to Photoshop. It's literally running perfect. No lags, no beach balls, no nothing. And this is while we're exporting that file. Now these Photoshop files don't have a ton of layers, but we got like 3 layers. This one has a little bit more, so there's some skin retouching stuff going on in it. Let's take a look at our activity monitor here. CPU, 17%. None of these apps seem to really push the CPU much. So all those Geekbench scores were showing the CPU so much faster. Do you really need it? I don't know. GPU is at 66% right now. Our memory is at 41 gigs. So I feel like if you had 48 gigs, you're still gonna be able to do a lot before it starts swapping with the SSD, but 64 gives you tons of headroom, and that's why I got it in the M1 Ultra Max Studio. All right, we're in Aperty here. This is like an AI skin retouching software. It does quite a bit of processing. I got one of these Hasselblad raw files in here so we can take a look at that. It's running nice and smooth, but I'm gonna do some blemish removal. It's applying. It's already done, okay? So that was fast. Always takes a little bit to process when you're zooming in and out. If we did skin smoothing, put that up a bit, applying, done. That's pretty fast. I can't remember how fast the M1 Ultra is, but that seems very fast. It's doing a great job. Now to save time in this video, I already know the M1 Ultra runs exactly the same in Aperty, so I'm not gonna show them side by side. And it also performs almost exactly the same in Photoshop as well. I could even open up Safari here, open up a bunch of tabs. Look who it is, it's Greg Gadgets doing the M4 Pro Mac Mini. Just to really push the system, I've got 20 tabs open in Safari. I've got like 3 4K videos playing in Safari. I've got my DaVinci Resolve timeline of this specific video that I'm editing, playing back in 24 frames per second, no drop frames, 4K, it's 10-bit video. I've got Photoshop open with some Hasselblad files. I'm jumping back and forth between these YouTube videos and taking a look at Activity Monitor. I'm not really using that much CPU, but I wanted to see how much RAM I was using, and I'm using about 46 to 48 gigs of RAM with all of this stuff going on. But yeah, I think that's going to conclude our tests. All right, after all those tests, here's the verdict. The M1 Ultra Max Studio is still absolutely a powerhouse. It's got that 48 core GPU, and that handles everything I throw at it effortlessly. Like, it's amazing for video editing. It's awesome for graphics work. So it really hasn't given me any issues, and it still does what I need it to do every day, and it does it well. But honestly, that M4 Pro Mac Mini held its own. It did a really good job, and I wasn't even really able to bog it down. I was doing like multiple tasks. I was rendering videos at the same time. And I'm actually editing this video right now on the M4 Pro Mac Mini with 2 studio displays. So these are 5K studio displays running off the Mac Mini, running flawless. This video I'm working on right now is H.265, so it's 4K 24, 4K 120, some ProRes mixed in there, and it's running basically like it would on the M1 Ultra. So I wanted to test out the SSD speeds on both of these systems. So starting out with the M4 Pro, we're getting around 6,000 write and 51 to 5,200 read. Actually on this run, we got 6,200 write and we're still around that 5,200 read. Now on the M1 Ultra, we're getting around the same speed. So 6,000 write or around 5,100 read. So the SSDs aren't that much faster in the new system, which is fine because these are really fast, and this is what helps with opening large files and saving large files, as well as opening apps. And I think this system is going to be more than enough for the majority of professionals out there that do photo and video editing, especially when it's just 4K footage. It can do it. It has no problems, especially if you don't need that high performance GPU stuff. So if you're not doing tons of effects and you don't care about the render speed or working with 8K footage, and even then this will probably handle 8K footage. I didn't even test that, but I know it will. Now, obviously I went for the M4 Pro chip that has more GPU and CPU cores. I also added 64 gigs of RAM, but I feel like 48 is probably fine if you don't want to spend that much money. This Mac Mini is way cheaper, it's newer, it's got faster single core performance, so it makes the system feel way snappier. It's got faster Wi-Fi, it takes up less space on your desk, and it has Thunderbolt 5. With all that said, the question is, should I switch to the M4 Pro Mac Mini? Because I was pretty surprised at what I was able to do with it. I was basically doing the exact same things the M1 Ultra Max Studio would do, and if you hid them behind something and didn't tell me which was which, I probably couldn't even tell. But the Mac Studio does have more I/O ports, faster ports in the front as well, and a stronger GPU, which is going to help with effects and faster rendering. And so since the M4 Pro isn't really going to improve on what I already have in the Mac Studio because it's still crushing it, I don't think I'm going to switch up. I think I'm just going to wait for the M4 Ultra or even the M4 Max Mac Studio when it comes out in the spring. Hopefully it comes out in the spring, and then I'll upgrade then. I'm also getting an M4 Pro 14-inch MacBook Pro. I'm actually going to replace my M1 MacBook Pro. I just sold that. So finally I'm going to upgrade that because I've been using that thing forever. And yeah, I'm stoked about that as well. If you want to see a video on that, let me know. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you dislike this video, give it a thumbs down twice. Don't forget to hit that notification bell, and I'll see you guys in the next one.